I remember the morning like it was yesterday, though it had been over a week since the chaos began. The sunlight poured through the curtains of my empty dining room, warm and golden, almost mocking me as I sat at the table with a stack of papers in front of me. My house, the home where Robert and I had raised our children, where birthdays were celebrated, where every corner held a memory, was officially sold. I had handed over the keys to the new owners just a few days ago, and now the money from the sale was in my hands. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the steam curling up and filling the room with the familiar aroma that had carried me through decades of early mornings and late nights. I tried to steady my hands, but they trembled slightly, betraying the anxiety I refused to let show. Today, I had to sit down with my children, Mark, my eldest, and Rachel, my youngest, to divide what was mine, what had been ours. I wanted fairness, and I wanted honesty, but a deeper, quieter part of me hoped, maybe, just maybe, I could finally be heard. They arrived promptly. Rachel, ever the polite one, hugged me before taking her seat. Her presence was a comfort, a reminder that not all of my children had lost their way in the pursuit of self-interest. Mark, on the other hand, looked restless, his eyes darting around the empty dining room, like he was searching for an escape route, or maybe sizing up the opportunity in front of him. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I cleared my throat and gestured toward the envelope. It was heavy with promise, heavy with the result of years of toil and sacrifice. "This is the money from the sale," I said slowly, "and we need to decide how it will be divided." Rachel nodded, waiting patiently, while Mark leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. I continued, my voice steady, firm. "Now, I think it's important we set aside a portion for my old age. This money isn't just yours to spend. I've worked my whole life, and I want to make sure I'm taken care of." Mark's reaction was instantaneous. Before I could even place the envelope in front of him, he snatched it from my hands with a sharpness that made me startle. "No!" he exclaimed, the sound echoing off the walls. "I promised a while ago that I would buy an apartment for my wife. You have a pension. You'll manage. Don't make this about yourself." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My own son had never spoken to me like this. My hands were empty, but my heart felt like it had been punched. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. I just remembered those words, over and over, echoing. "You have a pension. You'll manage." Rachel looked between us, wide-eyed, unsure of what to do. The tension in the room was palpable, thick like the humidity in summer. I stayed silent, watching Mark storm toward the door, the envelope clutched tightly in his hand as though it were a shield or a weapon. And then they left. The door clicked shut behind them, and the room was silent. I sat there, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on me. Part of me wanted to run after him, to demand he stop, to explain, to cry, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not anymore. That mother who always solved her children's problems, who always forgave, who always sacrificed, she had died the moment Mark tore that envelope from my hands. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed in silence. I held the coffee cup, letting the warmth seep into my fingers, letting the reality sink in. The betrayal had been swift, sharp, and undeniable. And yet, somewhere deep in my chest, a quiet, stubborn spark of clarity ignited. I had been blind for too long. I had let love cloud my judgment. I had let trust blind me. But not anymore. When they returned hours later from the real estate office, Mark and his wife were speechless. The apartment keys, the papers, everything. None of it mattered anymore. The envelope, still clutched tightly in my hands as I walked toward them, symbolized more than money. It symbolized my choice, my dignity, my refusal to be manipulated. Mark froze. His wife's hand went to her mouth in surprise, and I felt a strange calm, a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. The room, the money, the years of sacrifice, all of it came down to this moment. And I knew, deep in my bones, that nothing would ever be the same again. The silence in the room was heavy, almost suffocating. My hands still shook from the briefcase incident, though the envelope was back in my grasp. I held it close to my chest, feeling its weight, not in paper, but in years of trust and heartbreak. Mark stood a few steps away, his face pale, like he had just realized something far bigger than the apartment or the money. I remembered every promise, every empty word he had tossed around, and I wondered how my own son, the boy I had nurtured, could have turned into someone who thought he could take from me without consequence. But there was something else now, a faint flicker of recognition in his eyes, maybe guilt, maybe fear. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "Mark," I said quietly, "this isn't just about the money. It's about respect, about honesty, about what you've done and what you're willing to do to fix it." He opened his mouth, then closed it again, like the words had no shape yet. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the shame in his eyes. Rachel stood behind him, unsure where to look, as though the air itself had turned cold. Richard stepped forward, his calm presence steadying the storm that had overtaken the room. "Mrs. Lilia, the choice is yours," he said softly. "You can pursue the charges, or you can set conditions that give Mark a chance to make amends." I looked at my son, really looked at him, the man he had become, hardened by greed and impatience, but also the boy I had once held in my arms through nightmares, the teenager who had clung to me when his father died. I felt a wave of sorrow and love crash together, a storm I could no longer control. "I'm not pressing charges," I said, my voice trembling, but firm. "But there are conditions. You'll sign a document acknowledging what you did and waive any future claim to my money. You'll go to therapy, not for me, but for you. And I don't want to see or speak to you for a year." Tears filled Mark's eyes, raw and unpolished. "Mom, I'm sorry," he whispered. I don't know what came over me." "I know," I said softly, though a part of me wondered if he really did. "But this isn't about being sorry you got caught. This is about being sorry for hurting me. And that uncertainty, that's why I'm holding my ground." He signed the papers with a trembling hand, barely glancing at the words. Officer Adrian, who had quietly observed everything, nodded. "Technically, I could still arrest you," she said, "but your mother has chosen to handle this differently. Know that this is on record. Any future incident will reference today." Mark nodded silently. Rachel touched my shoulder, her warmth grounding me. Mom, are you okay? I nodded, unsure if I truly was. Part of me had lost a son that day, but another part had reclaimed herself. I had defended my dignity, and though it hurt, I knew it was the only way to survive. The world outside felt strangely quiet as we stepped out of the real estate office. The usual city hum, the honking cars, the chatter of passers-by, seemed distant, almost muted. Richard guided me to a nearby bench, sensing the storm inside me wasn't ready to calm on its own. I sank down heavily, the weight of adrenaline finally collapsing onto my shoulders. Rachel sat next to me, her hand gently brushing mine. "Sometimes words aren't necessary," she murmured. "Sometimes you just need someone to hold you while you break a little." I let the tears come then, silent, endless, streaming down my face as I stared at the envelope clutched in my hands. My son had taken so much from me, but in that moment, I realized he could never take this. My dignity, my voice, my self-worth. I whispered into the quiet. "I lost my son. I got my money back, but I lost him." Rachel shook her head, brushing a stray strand of hair from my face. "You didn't lose him, Mom. He lost himself. You just refused to get lost along with him." Her words sank into me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Maybe this was what Mark needed, to hit rock bottom, to see the consequences of his actions and the pain he had caused. But I also knew, deep in my bones, that my choices had saved me. I had survived, and that survival felt like a rebirth. Richard gently pulled out more documents from his briefcase. "We need to deposit this check today," he said, the practical tone of his voice grounding me further. "And we should set up protections for your accounts. We can't take chances after everything that's happened." I nodded, suddenly aware that amid the chaos of betrayal and confrontation, I had forgotten one thing. I was now homeless. The house I had spent 17 years creating. The home that had cradled so many memories had been sold. I had $280,000, yes, but nowhere to lay my head. Rachel squeezed my hand. "You can stay with me," she said immediately. "It's not much, but it's enough while we figure out your next step." I shook my head, surprising even myself. "No, thank you, Rachel. But I can't live off my children anymore. I've depended on them too much, expected too much. It's time I take care of myself, fully." I looked down at the envelope in my hands, thinking of all that had happened. "I'll find a small apartment, something manageable, something just for me, something no one can take away." Richard smiled, pride and warmth in his eyes. "That's the spirit. Tomorrow we'll start looking. I'll also help you set up a trust to protect your assets. Nothing complicated. Just ensuring your money is safe, exactly where you want it to be." The next morning at the bank, Miriam, the manager who knew me from years of banking, greeted us with surprise and concern. "Mrs. Lilia, I had no idea," she began. But we swiftly went through the motions. The check was deposited, the account temporarily frozen for security, and new passwords and protections put in place. Each action was a small reclaiming of control, a step back into the life I deserved. That evening at Rachel's apartment, I sat quietly on her sofa, the city lights casting a soft glow through the window. 4 days ago, I had still believed Mark, despite everything, would never truly hurt me. 4 days ago, I was a different person. Now, I was someone who had stood firm, who had chosen dignity over blind love. My phone rang just past midnight, an unknown number. I ignored it. Then another call. Then a voicemail. It was Esther, Mark's mother-in-law. And her voice was different. Tired, real, stripped of the artificial sweetness I remembered. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me," she began. "And I get it. But I need to say this. I was wrong. I pressured Mark, manipulated the condo situation. I made him feel he owed me everything. I never thought he'd go this far. I left him tonight. I filed for divorce. I don't expect forgiveness. Just the truth." I deleted the message. My chest ached with exhaustion. I didn't have energy for her apology. All I felt was bone-deep fatigue, a quiet understanding that some things could not be undone. Rachel sat beside me with key in hand. "You can't sleep?" she asked. I shook my head. "Mom," she said softly, "you've taught me something I'll never forget. Self-love isn't selfish. Boundaries aren't cruel. Defending yourself doesn't make you bad." And I realized she was right. I hadn't failed. I had acted. And in doing so, I had preserved something priceless. Myself. The following days unfolded in a strange mix of normacy and surrealism. Mornings were quiet, filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and the distant hum of the city. I would sit on Rachel's balcony, staring at the streets below without really seeing anything, letting my thoughts drift. Afternoons were spent apartment hunting, a process both exciting and strangely daunting. Each viewing brought a new mix of possibilities and anxieties. Reminders that I had lost a home but had yet to find a place to call my own. Richard was patient, guiding me through contracts, inspections, and negotiations. "Don't rush this," he told me one afternoon as we walked through a tiny studio apartment near a local park. "You've been through a storm. You need a place where you can heal, not just exist." The apartments varied. Some were cramped, others too expensive, and a few had a lingering smell of past tenants I couldn't shake. But then, on a Wednesday, we found it. A small condo on the 3rd floor, 20 minutes from Rachel's apartment. 2 bedrooms, a balcony adorned with plants left by the previous owner, and windows that let in the golden afternoon sun. I stepped in and felt it immediately. Not love at first sight, no, but something like possibility, a spark of hope that whispered, "This could be home." "This one," I said softly, surprising both Richard and the realtor. "This is the one." The price was reasonable, leaving me with enough money for furniture, emergencies, and to continue living comfortably. Richard carefully reviewed all documents, ensuring there were no hidden clauses or potential disputes. A week later, I signed the papers. For the second time in my life, I was a homeowner. But this time, it was just for me. Moving day was quiet. Rachel helped, though I had little to move. Most of my belongings had been sold at the house. I bought new furniture, a bed that didn't ache my back, a sofa perfect for reading, a small dining table for 2. Everything was simple, functional, and wholly mine. That night, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker to life as the sun dipped below the horizon. I could hear children laughing in the nearby park. The distant hum of traffic, life happening around me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. The silence of my phone was comforting. Mark hadn't contacted me, respecting the agreement. Esther had called once more, but I didn't answer. Some bridges were better left burned. 3 weeks later, I received something unexpected. A handwritten letter from Mark. I held it in my hands for several minutes, debating whether to open it. Curiosity finally won. "Mom," it began. "I know we agreed to no contact for a year, but I need to write. I started therapy as promised. At first, it was just to comply. But now I go because I need it. I'm seeing myself clearly, facing the ways I let resentment and greed take over. The divorce from Esther is finalized. I've lost friends who only cared about money and status. I'm learning to measure my worth differently. I'm not writing for forgiveness. I just want you to know that confronting me was the best thing anyone has ever done for me. You saved me from myself. I love you, Mom." The months that followed were slow and steady. I settled into a routine. Morning walks in the park, afternoons with books, or tending to my balcony plants, quiet dinners with Rachel, visits from Richard to manage finances, and small connections with neighbors. Miriam, from the 5th floor, became my confidant and companion in small adventures. We laughed through painting classes, discovered new restaurants, and went to free concerts in the park. Her words often reminded me, "You don't have to impress anyone anymore. You can fail, be ridiculous, and just be yourself." By 6 months, the condo was no longer a mere space with furniture. It was home. I woke each morning without anxiety, went to sleep without fear, and felt my health, my heart, and my dignity slowly repairing. My money grew steadily under Richard's careful management, and my mind, once crowded with worry, began to feel light. Rachel's happiness became a joy I hadn't expected. One Saturday, she introduced me to Daniel, a kind-hearted accountant. Seeing them together, the way he respected her, how relaxed she seemed, filled me with hope that love and goodness still existed in life, even after heartbreak. Alone on my balcony that night, staring at the stars, I reflected on the past year. I had lost a son in one sense, but I had also found myself. I had survived betrayal, reclaimed my dignity, and discovered what peace felt like. I realized the money, the house, the conflicts, they were never truly about material things. They were about self-respect, boundaries, and the courage to protect one's own life. And for the first time in 68 years, I felt free. Free to live for myself, to embrace small joys, to laugh without fear, to be unapologetically me. The year of silence with Mark was almost over, and I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Some days I missed him with a hollow ache in my chest. Other days, I felt relief that I no longer had to navigate his drama, his demands, the tension that had followed me like a shadow for decades. Mostly, though, it was calm, the kind I had never truly known before. Richard had been helping me organize my finances more thoroughly. "Lilia, with your investments and Social Security, you could comfortably live well into your 90s, he explained one afternoon. Then, leaning back in his chair, he asked a question that hit me like a sudden gust of wind. "But now, what do you want to do with your life?" not just survive. Live. I froze. I realized I had never really asked myself that question. For so long, life had been about sacrifice, about taking care of others. The luxury of thinking purely about myself felt foreign. I don't know, I admitted. Well, think about it now, Richard said with a gentle smile. You're 68, healthy, financially secure. The world is open to you in ways it wasn't before. Travel? Study something new? Take a hobby? It's your turn to choose. I started slowly, timidly. Painting classes, Italian cooking lessons, maybe a trip to Spain, to the land of my grandparents. The list grew daily, and with it, excitement, something I had forgotten I could feel. Miriam became my partner in adventure, and together we laughed through watercolor classes, went to concerts in the park, and tried new restaurants. Each moment, no matter how small, reminded me that life could be joyful even after pain. Then, one quiet morning, a letter arrived. Mark's handwriting. My heart skipped. I held it in my hands for several minutes, debating whether to read it. Finally, curiosity overcame hesitation. Mom, it began. The year is almost up. I know we agreed to no contact, but I need you to know I've changed. I'm not perfect. I still have bad days, but I'm different from the man who hurt you. If you want to see me when the year ends, I'll be here. If not, I understand and respect your choice. I just want you to be happy. I love you. I showed it to Rachel, who smiled gently. Mom, he's kept his word. He hasn't harassed you, hasn't pressured you. He's gone to therapy. But remember, your peace comes first. You don't owe him anything. Whatever you choose is entirely yours. Finally, the day came. Exactly 1 year since the confrontation at the real estate office. I sat on the balcony of my condo, drinking coffee and watching the city wake up. I felt a quiet strength I hadn't known before. This wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was simply opening a door. A cautious, measured opening. The coffee shop I chose was public, crowded, nothing intimate. I needed boundaries, and strangers around us ensured they would be respected. Richard arrived first, sitting nearby but not with us. His presence was a comfort, a safety net. Mark arrived precisely on time. He looked different, thinner, subdued, a touch of gray at his temples. Simple clothes, but the most striking change was in his expression. Gone was the arrogance I had known for years. In its place was humility, a nervous but genuine earnestness. He approached slowly. Mom, he said softly, his voice breaking slightly. He did not reach for a hug. He kept a respectful distance as he sat across from me. Thank you for coming. Thank you for giving me this chance, he said. I'm here to listen, I replied, my voice firmer than I expected. I want to see if you've really changed, or if this is just another performance. No pretty words. Facts. What's really different? Mark nodded, eyes glistening. I left my job at the construction firm. Toxic environment, all about appearances and status. I work independently now. Less money, but happier. I sold my luxury car for a reliable used one. I live in a small apartment I can afford. I'm still in therapy, twice a week. I've been learning where my need for more came from. My insecurities, resentment, guilt. I realize now how I turned your love and sacrifice into debt, into anger. And Esther, she validated my worst instincts. I see it all now. Pause. I listened, silent, letting the words sink in. Resentment, guilt, self-awareness. For the first time, I understood that his actions weren't just ingratitude. They were complex, layered, human mistakes. "What do you want from me, Mark?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "No forgiveness expected. No going back. I just want you to know I've changed. And if someday you decide to let me in, I'll respect whatever boundaries you set. If not, I'll understand." I looked at the man before me, the 43-year-old I had raised, flawed but striving. I also saw the scars he had left on me: distrust, fear, caution. "I don't know if I can trust you. I don't know if I want to try," I said honestly. He nodded. "And that's okay." I surprised myself, but I'm willing to try something small. Coffee once a month. No expectations, no promises. If I see old patterns, I'm walking away. No second chances. "Do you understand?" "Yes," he said, a small, tentative smile breaking through. "I won't waste it." I sipped my coffee, feeling a strange calm. "Mark, I am okay now. I have my condo, my friends, my routine. I have peace. I will not sacrifice that for anyone, not even you. The son I raised is always in my heart. The man who hurt me has no place here. Only the man before me now. Only he has a chance." We spent another hour talking about superficial things: my painting classes, his new job, Rachel and Daniel. We avoided the deep wounds. They were still too raw to confront fully. When we said goodbye, he extended his hand. I shook it briefly, a small gesture heavy with unspoken meaning. Richard walked me home afterward. "You did well, Lilia," he said. "You were clear, firm, but gave him a chance. You protected yourself and offered a small measure of hope." That night, alone on my balcony with tea in hand, I reflected. Mark thought he could take my dignity along with my money. He was wrong. That day, he showed me my strength, my worth, my right to self-love. He lost much, yes, but I gained something invaluable: freedom, peace, and myself. I didn't need to be the perfect, endlessly sacrificing mother. I just needed to be Lilia, a 68-year-old woman who had loved deeply, been betrayed terribly, and chosen her own dignity above all else. And that was more than enough. Weeks passed since that first cautious meeting with Mark. The weight I had carried for decades, the fear, the betrayal, the constant need to be everything for everyone, was lifting little by little. Life wasn't perfect, and some days still carried an echo of the past. But the calm I felt now was different from anything I had known before. It wasn't just freedom from him, it was freedom from the expectations I had placed on myself. Miriam and I continued our little adventures. On a crisp Sunday morning, we signed up for a pottery class at a local community center. My hands, awkward and clumsy, turned clay into blobs more than bowls. But we laughed until our cheeks hurt. "Lilia," Miriam said one afternoon as we cleaned our hands in the sink, "look at us. We're ridiculous. We don't have to impress anyone, not our kids, Not the world, just us. And she was right. We were free. Rachel visited more often now, bringing Daniel along sometimes. Watching them together warmed me in ways I hadn't expected. Their laughter filled my condo like sunlight. I still worried, silently, that one day life could change again. But I had learned how to set boundaries, how to hold my peace above all else. Mark called occasionally, checking in, asking if I wanted to meet for coffee. Each time I measured my feelings, my instincts sharpened by the year of distance, and each time I found a small space for cautious connection. No expectations, no pressure, just two people attempting to navigate a complicated past with honesty. One afternoon, as I watered the small balcony garden I had started, I realized how far I had come. The roses I planted weren't perfect, but they bloomed anyway. I smiled at the thought, realizing it was a reflection of myself. I wasn't perfect either, but I was thriving. ... I decided to take a short trip to Spain, the country of my grandparents. Standing in the streets of Barcelona, the colors, the music, the smells, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, unburdened joy. I wandered through museums, sat in cafes for hours, read books in the sunlight, and even tried to sketch a few buildings, laughing when my lines refused to make sense. Letters from Mark sometimes reached me on these trips, but they no longer carried the weight of past guilt. They were simple check-ins, small bridges between cautious hearts, and each time I felt a quiet satisfaction. I had not lost myself, even when I opened the door. Back home, I continued painting classes with Miriam. Our apartment walls began to fill with our colorful, imperfect work. Some days, I'd sit in my living room, sipping tea, and look at the collection of memories on my walls. Photos, paintings, mementos of a life rediscovered. I thought of the young woman on the beach, in the old photo I had found, the one who had smiled without a care in the world. I realized she had never truly left me. I had just needed permission to live for myself again. One evening, Rachel and Daniel stopped by for dinner. Mark had texted earlier, asking if he could drop by to say hello. I thought about it, felt the familiar knot of fear, but then reminded myself of the boundaries I had set. I agreed, on my terms, in my space, with Richard. When Mark arrived, there was no tension, no anger, no past haunting the room. Just two people, mother and son, navigating a delicate new rhythm. They talked about simple things: Rachel's garden, Daniel's new project, Mark's latest consulting work. I listened, quiet, present, aware of my strength. I could love my son without surrendering my peace. I could witness his attempts at change without erasing the scars he had left. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat on my balcony with tea in hand, the city lights twinkling like distant stars. I realized something profound. I had survived betrayal, manipulation, and loss. I had loved, fought, and protected myself. And now I could live fully, not for anyone else, not for duty or guilt, but for me. I was Lilia, 68 years old, a mother, a survivor, a woman who had learned that dignity and self-love were not luxuries. They were necessities. And for the first time in my life, I felt the deep, unshakable truth of it. Life had given me another chance, and I intended to live it fiercely, joyfully, and entirely on my own terms. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer controlled me. I had my peace. I had my freedom. I had myself. And that was more than enough.